Okay, welcome back from your break, everyone. We're going to move into this next topic of identifying cravings, cultivating non-craving, and analysis of the mind. This is something that I just taught in the group learning program this past Sunday, but it's part of this particular class because in order to get to harmonious relationships, you're going to need to actually eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments. As long as you have cravings, desires, attachments where your mind is wanting and expecting things to be a certain way, you're not going to be able to get to harmony in all your relationships. So all the things that I was teaching yesterday with the Eightfold Path, that's the generalized training to help you to eliminate craving, desire, attachment from the mind. So you're going to need to bring that into your life practice more and more closely. You're going to need to know that inside and out. You're going to need to memorize the Eightfold Path so that you know it cold in your mind, because you're not going to be able to practice it if you're not actually memorizing it. So if somebody said, what is right intention? I know the Buddha taught something about that. What is that? You should be able to say, the intention of renunciation, non-ill will, and harmlessness, and then know how to practice those things. And then the same thing with like right speech. You would know that it's the refraining from lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. And then the 5 factors of well-spoken speech is speaking at the proper time, what you say is true, gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness. And you would know how to practice all of those things. You're going to need to know each individual factor of the Eightfold Path. And as you put all that together and you're doing that well, you're going to start to experience what's called the jhanas. The jhanas are these preliminary phases of the mind where you're on your way to the first stage of enlightenment, and there's these enhanced qualities of mind that you'll experience. And the Buddha explains that as part of right concentration. You can see what he talks about for the jhanas, and you'll be able to see that your mind is actually experiencing those exact qualities. This is where it gets really real for you as a practitioner, because you're going to be looking at this text from 2,500 years ago, and you will have practiced what it is that the Buddha taught you, and you're going to be experiencing the very things that he's actually talking about over 2,500 years ago, and you're going to be like, whoa, this is pretty intriguing that this individual spoke this stuff 2,500 years ago. Here I am practicing it, and it's working, and I'm experiencing the exact things that he said that I would be experiencing. So you're going to need to memorize the Eightfold Path in order to eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments. As you get that well underway, which includes your meditation and all those other things, you would then like to move into understanding something like this, because this is one of the important skills or abilities that you're going to need on your journey to enlightenment, where meditation is vitally important in order for you to learn that skill and ability to meditate. This is probably the second most important thing in terms of your skills and abilities and techniques to be able to learn in addition to meditation. So I'm going to teach this to you, and then I'm going to help you to be able to understand how to use it in your day-to-day life. Whether now is the right time for you to be using it or not, that's what you need to decide, because you're your own independent practitioner. You need to know where you're at on the path to enlightenment. If you're still working to learn the Eightfold Path and get that going in your life, then maybe you hang out with that for a while. But at least you'll know this because it's in the book, and you'll hear me teaching it to you now, so that when you're ready for it, you can start practicing it. So the very first part of this particular talk, one second, let me switch over to visual aids for everybody online. The first part of this particular talk, I spend time to make sure that students understand what is craving, desire, attachment. We talked about this yesterday in this course, so I'm sure that you guys all know what this is, but there might be some people online who are joining us that weren't here yesterday. So what craving, desire, attachment is this mental longing and strong eagerness, the mind holding on, the mind chasing after the objects of its affection, thinking that the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide lasting satisfaction. This is the longing, the yearning, the unquenchable thirst, the mind thinking that something external is going to provide some lasting satisfaction. So it chases and chases and chases and chases. And if it gets what it wants, it gets happy. It gets those pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. But if the mind doesn't get what it wants, it gets the painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, things like this. Okay, so this is what craving, desire, attachment is. This is the cause of discontentedness. The problem that the Buddha discovered in the mind is the discontent feelings, the conditional feelings, how the mind goes up into this happiness and excitement, then it's down in this sadness and this anger. The mind's going up and down and up and down. That's the problem. The cause of it is craving, desire, attachment. So this craving, desire, attachment is the first of the three poisons or the three unwholesome roots or the three fires. This is the cause of discontentedness as part of the Four Noble Truths. It's described in the second noble truth as the cause of all discontentedness. Also, as you start to learn about the cycle of rebirth, understand that this is the fuel or this is the cause that produces rebirth. Right now, you might not have the wisdom to independently verify the cycle of rebirth, but as you progress in your journey to enlightenment, you'll be able to learn the wisdom of how to independently verify this, that there is a cycle of rebirth, that you keep experiencing birth over and over and over again. Well, it's craving, desire, attachment that not only causes the discontent feelings, but if there's craving, desire, attachment in the mind at the time of death, that's what's causing rebirth to occur. So just understand that that's the case. So in terms of this craving, desire, attachment, the number one goal on the path to enlightenment is to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, because the number one goal is to get to the peace and the joy, the calmness in the mind. And you wouldn't be able to do that as long as you have craving, desire, attachment in your mind. So getting to enlightenment is to get to the permanent peace, calm, serenity, and contentedness with joy. So the number one goal on the path to enlightenment is to eliminate the cravings, desires, attachments. And of course, that comes through cultivation of wisdom. You need to be able to cultivate the wisdom of how to do that. But what you're cultivating wisdom about is how to eliminate the craving, desire, attachment from the mind. But how could you actually eliminate these cravings, desires, attachments if you couldn't identify them and you couldn't see what they actually are? So developing this ability to identify your cravings, desires, attachments, it's the second most important skill that you could develop on this path to enlightenment. Where breathing mindfulness meditation is training the mind to let go, you need that in order to be able to practice something like what I'm going to teach you here today. That's why that's kind of like a preliminary thing that you're developing very early in your practice on the path to enlightenment, because you need to train your mind to let go. And that's what the breathing mindfulness meditation is doing, as well as the generosity. Generosity is training your mind to let go as well. So in the mental discipline section, you guys learned yesterday that with your mindfulness, whenever you see the bodily sensations associated with craving, desire, attachment are arising, like that tingling in the body, the tightening in the chest, the tightening in the throat, the heat in the face, the pressure in the skull, when you see that with your mindfulness, you would like to apply right effort to cut that off and let that go. That's what you're doing with the mental discipline section. And the meditation is helping you to be able to accomplish that in practicing singleness of mind. But now I'm going to teach you something where you can actually use what you've already learned through the Eightfold Path and now go in and almost surgically remove these cravings, desires, attachments. If you were driving a car and a light came on your dashboard that said, "Service engine soon," you would probably pull over. And if you have skills, you would probably pop the hood and you would start looking inside the car. And if you didn't have skills, you'd probably take it to a mechanic and have somebody else take a look at it for you, right? This red light is alerting you that, hey, something's wrong inside this car. You need to take some action here. And the discontentedness that you experience, whether it's anger and sadness and frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all these feelings and others, this is the red light on the dashboard of your car, alerting you that you have some cravings, desires, attachments within your own mind. And what you would like to do is you'd like to pull over and start looking inward. Instead of where you were before, perhaps, before you learned the Four Noble Truths, you might have been looking to blame other people for the feelings that you were experiencing. But now when you understand right view and you're establishing right view, you know that that's unwise to blame other people for the feelings you're experiencing. So you basically pull over and you look internally. You become introspective. You look inward and try to figure out, what are the cravings, desires, attachments that are in my mind that are causing this discontentedness? And where you can't observe that and you can't figure that out, that's where you take your mind to the mechanic, right? The mechanic in this scenario is your teacher, that you might need to come to me a few times and say, "Hey, David, here's the situation that's occurring. I have no idea what my cravings are. Can you help me with this?" And I'll talk you through it and I'll help you to develop this skill. And after you develop the skill, you'll get really good at it and you'll be able to figure these out on your own. But initially, you're going to potentially need some help to figure out what are your cravings? What are the mind's longing and yearning for? What is it wanting? What is it expecting? So use that discontentedness as a red light on the dashboard of your car. You're not going to ignore that red light on the dashboard of your car because you know it's very unwise to drive a car with the red light on the dashboard of the car saying service engine soon. Same thing is true, that it's unwise to go through life with this anger and this stress and sadness and frustration. You need to uncover what are the cravings that are producing this so that then you can eliminate it. So now I'm going to teach you a process that when you see this red light of discontentedness coming up on your dashboard, I'm going to share with you a step-by-step process of how to deal with this. Okay, so what you do is when the discontentedness is arising, step one is you cut it off and let it go. You don't even think about it. You just automatically know that whenever there's discontentedness arising, you cut it off and let it go. And the sooner you catch it, the better. If you can catch it as a bodily sensation, that's ideal. But because your mind's not fully trained, your mind's not fully disciplined, it's going to become a feeling sometimes. So cut it off there, because if you don't, it's going to affect the condition of your mind. And now for a few hours or a few days, you're going to be irritable and grumpy and agitated. And if you don't cut it off there, it's going to feed those mental objects. That's what we were talking about yesterday with the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So step one is anytime you see discontentedness arising, cut it off and let it go. Cut it off and let it go. And you might need to redirect the mind in these situations. Like I gave you that example, if you're watching TV, you're watching the news, you notice some discontentedness starting to arise, don't just sit there and dwell in it. Cut off the news, go for a walk, go outside, get some fresh air, go ride a bicycle, go get a drink of water from the kitchen or something like this. Don't just allow the mind to sit there and dwell in those feelings and stay wired that way to have conditioned feelings. When you notice the conditioned feelings are about to be formed, you cut it off and let it go. And over time, you'll completely transform the mind. But then you move to step 2. Once your mind is calm, and that might be a couple of minutes, it might be a couple of hours, it might be a couple of days. When your mind is calm, you start reflecting because you need that calmness in the mind to be able to see clearly. You start looking inward. You start becoming introspective. What is it that I'm craving here? What is the mind expecting? What does it want? It's craving something to be permanent. And it might be more than one thing. It might not just be one thing. So you'd like to look inward and figure out, what are you craving? What's the desire? What's the longing? What's the expectation? Then you would like to move to step number 3. Develop a plan to eliminate this specific craving from the mind that's causing this discontentedness. All the while, you need to be maintaining your breathing mindfulness meditation and your generosity on a consistent, ongoing basis, because that's the generalized training that's helping you to eliminate all cravings, desires, attachments, your breathing mindfulness meditation and your generosity. But this plan that I'm talking about relates to whether your mind is craving, desiring, attachment, holding on to this thing and getting pleasant feelings from it, or whether you're getting painful feelings from this thing. If you're having a craving that you're getting pleasant feelings, conditional pleasant feelings from this thing, that means your mind is longing, yearning, you're clinging to it. In order to eliminate that particular craving, you're going to need to distance yourself from it in order to train your mind to let it go. If you have a certain craving, desire, attachment where you're repulsed by this thing and you're pushing it away, you're going to need to actually put the mind in that situation in order for it to let go of this craving, desire, attachment. I'm going to give you some examples of this here in a moment. Then after you develop your plan and you execute this plan that I'm going to show you how to do, then you go to number 4. Number 4 is you repeat this process for each incident of discontentedness that is arising while seeking guidance with the teacher. That each time you go right on through all these steps. Okay, so let me give you some examples of this. So one time I was driving my wife's truck down the street, and I reached down to grab my mobile phone, and I realized that my mobile phone wasn't in my pocket, and I happened to be at a red light when this was actually happening, and this fear came into my mind. I got fearful right away because I didn't have my mobile phone with me. And I started thinking about, oh my goodness, if I get a flat tire, I get in an accident, what am I going to do? And all this fear started coming up in the mind. And initially, my mind wanted to turn around and go back home and get the phone because I was only about 5 minutes from the house, could have easily went and got the phone. But I didn't do that. I cut that off and let it go. I cut that fear off. And I let it go. And I sat there and I thought for a second, what is going on here? Why is my mind experiencing this fear? And I realized that the mind was craving for this phone to be permanent. It wanted this phone to be permanent. If I had it with me, I felt fine. I felt pleasant feelings. I felt comfortable. But when it wasn't with me, i.e. I was experiencing some impermanence because this phone is not permanent, the mind didn't feel comfortable. It felt fear in that situation. So instead of turning around and going home, I went to, as I, cut off and let go, I started reflecting and I saw that the craving, desire, attachment was the phone. Then I moved to step number 3, which instead of going home to go get the phone, because that doesn't solve the problem, the cause of the problem was the craving in the mind. And going back to the phone wasn't going to solve that. So because my mind was attracted to this and holding on to it, I needed to distance myself from it. So I continued in my day. I was only supposed to be out for about an hour and a half that day, but I decided to stay out longer. I went to eat food. I went to the movies. I got some popcorn. I was outside for like 5 or 6 hours that day. I had a good old time outside. Initially, I felt uncomfortable, but slowly but surely, I started feeling better and better as I was outside without this phone. I was putting the mind in that situation by distancing my mind from this object. And then when I ultimately went home that day, I didn't just run to the phone. Instead, I left it where it was. And I spent time with my son and did whatever I was going to do for 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. And then eventually I went and looked at the phone. Okay. Then, because I was putting together this plan to eliminate this craving, desire, attachment, about 2 or 3 days later, I intentionally left the phone at home. And then I went outside without the phone. And once again, I did a whole bunch of stuff. And then I still felt awkward. I didn't have the fear, but I still felt awkward outside without the phone. And then when I came home, I didn't run to the phone right away. I just left it where it was for 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. Then I went and checked the phone. Then I did it again about 2 or 3 or 5 days later. I did it again. And this time I didn't have any awkwardness at all. I felt just fine going outside without the phone. And I thought that, yeah, I probably have eliminated this craving, right? So then I just started taking the phone out with me. Well, about 2 months later, I accidentally left the phone at home again. And I was riding down the road. I reached for the phone and it wasn't there. And I was like, oh, well, and I just kept on going. There was no fear. There was no nothing. And I knew like, I have eliminated this craving because, a couple months before when the phone wasn't there, there was all this fear. But this time it was like, oh, well, I've been outside without the phone before. I can do it again. No big deal, right? Just kept on going in my day, right? And then about a year after that, I accidentally dropped my phone and the entire screen shattered. And I looked at the phone and I started laughing. And I was like, yeah, of course it's broken because that's impermanence. It's not permanent. And fortunately, my wife had an extra phone. So I just started using that phone instead of the other phone, right? So this is how you can train your mind to get rid of a craving, desire, attachment, because phones are not permanent in your life. And if you're used to having your phone close to you all the time, maybe when you misplace it, you feel anxiety, you feel stress, you're not quite sure where it's at. You're going to need to train your mind to let go of this phone, right? And this is the way that you would do it. Well, then this is a situation where I was holding on to something, wanting it to be permanent. But then there's situations where like there's a certain fruit here in Asia that I despised and I was repulsed by it and I was pushing it away and I didn't want it anywhere near me. You guys might know this fruit. It's called durian, right? For me, I think it smells like poop. Some people adore this fruit. They think it's the best fruit ever. But at that time, I despised it, right? Whenever I put it in my mouth, I've never had poop in my mouth before, but if I did, I think it would be just like this fruit, right? The consistency of it, the smell of it, all this kind of stuff. So the first time I ever put it in my mouth, I think I spit it back out, right? And I was despised by this, right? So I knew like, this is sensual desire. I'm going to need to train my mind to eliminate this. So in this situation, I'm not going to distance myself from it, because that's with something that you're holding on to. This is something that I was repulsed by. So I needed to bring this into my life in order to train my mind to be comfortable with it. So what I started doing is I started eating durian fruit inside of cakes, like a cake. They would make these durian cakes where they'd have durian inside the cake. And when I would eat it, I would still smell it a little bit. It wasn't quite as strong, but I could still smell it a little bit, but the consistency wasn't there. So I was gradually kind of training my mind to get comfortable with this durian fruit. So I would eat these cakes with the durian fruit in it. And then after I did that for a period of time, I started then trying the actual fruit itself. And when I tasted the actual fruit, my mind associated with this durian fruit in a different way, because I had it as these cakes, which I enjoyed, the cakes, and now I could eat the actual fruit. So I'd gotten rid of that craving to not have this durian fruit in my mouth by putting the mind in the situation that it didn't want to be in. So when the discontentedness is arising, you cut it off and let it go, whether it's a pleasant feeling, painful feeling, or neither painful nor pleasant. Then you reflect and look inward. When the mind's calm, you reflect and look inward. What are you craving? What are you longing and yearning for that your mind is causing these discontent feelings with the cravings? Then you put together a plan to either distance yourself from it or to bring it in and put the mind in the situation that it doesn't want to be in. And then if you need help, you come and get help from your teacher, and you repeat this over and over and over and over and over again. There's no secret on the path to enlightenment, but if there was kind of like something that you really need to clue into, you need to be able to see that these conditioned pleasant feelings are just as much a part of the problem as the painful ones. It becomes very intuitive. It's very natural to understand the painful feelings, that you would like to cut off the anger and the sadness and the frustration, the guilt, the shame, the fear, the stress, the anxiety. That makes complete sense to you. But when we talk about cutting off the pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria, you need to understand that these are conditioned pleasant feelings, that the mind can only be happy if this thing is occurring. And now when this thing occurs, I will be happy. And when you're allowing your mind to do that, you're sabotaging your ability to be happy permanently. Because if you can only be happy when this thing is occurring, that means when it's not occurring, you can't be happy. And because everything around you is impermanent, this thing is not permanent. So if you can only be happy when it's sunny outside, and you get so happy when it's sunny outside, that means when it rains, and it will rain, you're going to be sad or frustrated. If you get so happy when your bank account balance is up here, that means when it goes down here, you're going to be frustrated or sad or angry, right? Some other discontent feeling. So you need to be able to see these conditioned pleasant feelings as just as much a part of the problem as the painful ones. Because by you getting rid of the conditioned pleasant feelings, you can get to the permanent unconditioned happiness, the unconditioned joy, the permanent joy. If you're not willing to let go of the temporary happiness, you won't ever get to the permanent happiness. So you need to see that conditional pleasant feelings as part of the problem, because the way that the mind's working is that if this is happening and this is happening and this is happening and this is happening and this is happening, then I'll be happy. If my mom and dad do this, if my boss does this, if the weather is this, if my bank account is this, if I get to go on vacation, if I get this and this and this, okay, then I will be happy. So the amount of happiness that you can have becomes less and less and less because you have more and more conditions that have to be met. But when you get rid of that, your mind can be happy all the time. So you need to be able to see those bodily sensations associated with the pleasant feelings that are arising. And those are very pleasurable to feel. We actually even call them, in some cultures, we call them warm fuzzies, right? The little tingling across the shoulders, up the back of the neck, over the skull. It's like, oh, it feels so good to feel those, right? But you got to understand that that's the bodily sensations associated with discontentedness arising. And if you allow your mind to form that conditioned pleasant feeling over here, when that thing changes, you're now going to experience the anger and the sadness and the frustration. So you need to be able to see these pleasant feelings as just as much a part of the problem as the painful ones, because that's what's going to allow you to get to the permanent happiness and the permanent joy. Okay, so this is the process that you would encounter. This is what you would like to be doing with each individual craving, desire, attachment. And now what I usually do, as you guys would like to ask questions on this, is if you'd like, we can do this group activity where you guys can work on developing this ability to identify your own cravings, desires, attachments. If you like, after you ask any questions that you like about what I already taught, what you can do is you can share a situation where you've recently been discontent, either pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. And you can say, hey, here's the situation, but I have no idea what my cravings are. And I will help you understand what your cravings are, and I will help you develop a plan for how to eliminate it. Or you might say, here's the situation, and here's what I think my cravings are, but I have no idea how to put together a plan. And I will help you confirm that and put together a plan. Or you could say, here's the situation, here's my cravings, and here's the plan that I think I should put together. And then I will help you to confirm that, so that then you can walk away with some confidence in having put together this skill and ability to look at your own mind and figure out what are your cravings, desires, attachments, and putting together a plan to actually eliminate them. So let me know what your questions are on the things that I've taught you. Or if you like, you can do this here, this group activity, to be able to develop this ability to look inward and analyze the mind and walk away with this skill to be able to identify your cravings and put together a plan for how to eliminate them. Jake, you have something?
Yeah, my question is about what I would refer to as a primal fear, something that is deeply rooted in your mind that you can't even approach. How would you start to wear away from that? Wear away at that? Like, let's say you had a deathly afraid of spiders or heights or something like that.
Okay, so all that's happening there is the mind is clinging to the perception that a spider is bad and it's going to harm this body. And the mind might be craving permanent existence. And now it's trying to push away these spiders and never see a spider. So what you do is you actually introduce the mind into this, because remember, there's two scenarios. One is you're clinging to something, getting pleasant feelings. The other one is you're trying to push it away. If you're trying to push something away, you'd like to put your mind in that situation in order to desensitize it to that particular thing. The example I gave you was the durian fruit. But now if we take spiders, so if someone was afraid of spiders, I would suggest that they look at pictures in a magazine or on the internet of spiders. And now they're going to see the fear coming up, and they got to cut that off and cut that off and cut that off. And now maybe they go to a museum to kind of increase it. After they've gotten comfortable with that for a while, now they go to maybe a museum where spiders are preserved, and they see their eyes and they see their hair and they see these little things, and now their fear is coming up, and they're cutting that off and cutting that off and cutting that off. And now maybe they go to an environment where they're actually alive, like maybe out in the woods or at a pet store or something like this. And now they desensitize their mind to that, because what they need to do is they need to essentially rewire the mind to realize that seeing a spider doesn't mean something bad's going to happen to me. Right? Because the mind is associating that. It's clinging to that perception. But now what you're doing is you're rewiring the mind to realize that, no, I can see a spider and I can walk away and be just fine. Spiders doesn't mean harm is going to come to me. It's just a spider. And if I don't cause harm to the spider's not going to cause harm to me. So you're kind of creating new situations where your mind can be rewired to realize that being around a spider doesn't mean something harmful is going to happen. And now you can let go of that perception that spiders are bad and something bad's going to happen to me every time I'm around a spider. So the mind can eliminate that clinging. So that would be the plan that somebody would do, is introduce the mind to these spiders on multiple occasions until there's no more fear. Mm-hmm.
You gave examples on pleasant feelings and painful feelings, moving towards, moving away from. What about painful nor pleasant?
Yeah, neither painful nor pleasant. So say someone was shy, right? So say like they're scared of doing public speaking, right? It's the same kind of situation that they're going to need to put their mind in that situation in order to eliminate the shyness, right? Or say they were uncomfortable sitting next to someone who they don't know on public transportation and they feel uncomfortable. They're going to need to go take public transportation and sit next to people who they don't know, and they're going to need to expose the mind to that in order to eliminate that. So each situation, even the neither painful nor pleasant feelings, there's going to be some kind of either grabbing on and holding on to something, or there's going to be a repulsion where the mind's trying to push it away. And usually the neither painful nor pleasant feelings, the mind's trying to push this thing away. So you need to expose the mind to that situation. You're essentially desensitizing it. In modern psychology, they refer to what I'm talking about as exposure therapy, where you're exposing the mind to the thing that it doesn't want to experience, and now you desensitize it to that particular stimulus, and that's when it'll actually overcome its craving and it'll get free of that. It'll get liberated from that situation. And now, because you can't go through life with never seeing a spider, it's just not possible. You're going to see a spider at some point. So if we just keep trying to push away the spider and never see a spider, every 2 years, every 5 years, when we see a spider, it's a spider, right? So we haven't actually solved the problem, which is the fear, because the craving still exists in the mind. But if we get rid of the craving, then we've solved the problem, which is the fear. So whether it's a pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, you need to look at whether the mind is grabbing onto it and trying to hold on to it, or whether it's repulsed and pushing it away. And then you will know what to do. Either distance yourself from it or put the mind in the situation and desensitize it. Mm-hmm. Have a question?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. I thought about your example with the phone. For me, if I would forget my phone, I think there are more fears behind this fear of just not having the phone as a thing, because it's not being reachable. So nobody can reach me at this point. I maybe don't know where I am because I have my Google Maps there. And so I think, there's really a lot of work to do from maybe, or more work than just, not having a thing. So these other fears not being reachable, just want to share this thought, because I think there are more fears behind one fear maybe.
Yeah, so it's still the underlying craving for that phone to be permanent that is producing the fear. The fear is just the symptom. The fear isn't the cause of the problem. The fear is the problem, but the cause of it is the craving. So since not having the phone is producing this fear, these problems in the mind, when you train your mind to get rid of the phone and distance yourself from the phone, you'll get rid of the underlying craving that's producing any number of those fears. And now all of those fears will be cleared out of the mind, because you'll see that, hey, I can go into the world without a phone. I don't know how old you are, but when I was growing up, there was no such thing as mobile phones. We would go out into the world with no phone, right? And then we were just fine to go out in the world with no phone. But now people's minds, and mine included, was grabbing onto it and was attached to it. So you're going to need to put the mind in that situation, and you'll get rid of the underlying cause of each individual one of those fears. And because you're getting rid of the cause, every single one of those will be eliminated from the mind.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Anybody have a situation that you would like to, get a mic, have a situation you guys would like to get help with to be sure that you understand this?
Yes. Sometimes I'm afraid of fear, because when you're asking, you have the question, and sometimes I'm afraid to express my mind, and because I'm afraid of the criticizing about maybe because we have the WeChat group, like on the phone. Like we have the WeChat group, and then sometimes we have the society. Then we express your feeling, whether you're in your mind or your ideas. But I'm afraid to say it.
Okay, so this is the personal existence view, what we talked about yesterday, that the mind is clinging to this self-image and the self-identity, wanting to be perceived by other people in a certain way. And when you're not being perceived that way, you're uncomfortable. So by you putting your mind in that situation, that's going to actually help you to get rid of it. So even though you're hesitant to write in the WeChat group, you would like to do just the opposite. You would like to comment in there and share your thoughts. And if somebody criticizes you and says something negative or degrading, just ignore it. And now train your mind that this is okay, because some people are going to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to you. Other people are not. That is impermanence. That's not the problem. The problem is the lack of confidence in the mind, the scares, the fears. The cause of that is the craving. So when you put your mind in that situation where you make a comment, some people are going to be positive and agree with you. Other people are going to disagree with you, and they might be judgmental. This is just impermanence. That's all. And don't have a craving or clinging for other people to perceive you a certain way. If someone looks at you in a negative way, that's an indication of what's going on in their mind. That's not an indication of how you're communicating. That's an indication of what's going on in their mind, that they're being hateful, they're being vindictive, they're being impolite, unkind, unfriendly, disrespectful. That's the lack of wisdom of their own mind. So you would like to be able to understand that, because sometimes we feel guilty and shameful. We feel like we're less of a person. But just understand that this person who's being negative and degrading and diminishing, that's a reflection of what's going on in their mind, not your mind. And then just do what you need to do, and just realize that not everyone's going to be loving and kind to you. Even someone like the Buddha, Jesus Christ, Prophet Muhammad, these people did amazing things in the world, and there's still people that hate them, right? So surely you and me and everyone else, there's going to be people that hate us. Not everyone's going to love us, but that's a reflection of what's going on in their mind, not you.
Okay, just stop thinking it's not my fault.
Yeah, it's not your fault that they think that way. That's their anger, that's their hatred, that's their expectations, that's their cravings, and they're trying to put that on you. Because when people are criticizing you, particularly in an unsolicited way, that's their ego. I know what's right. I'm right and everyone else is wrong. And now this girl is wrong, and I need to set her straight, and I need to tell her how it is. That's the ego. So you could just acknowledge that and just know in your mind, this is that person's ego, has nothing to do with me. This is my opinion. This is my view. I'm going to share it. And of course, people are going to disagree with me because of impermanence, right? Not everyone's going to agree with you.
Okay.
That's okay.
And by the way, about the spider, and I'm afraid of cat.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the same thing, you would like to put your mind in the situation to be around cats. You can start with pictures, because that's kind of like non-threatening. It's just a 2D image. You can look at pictures on the internet or videos on the internet. Then you might go to a situation where you're actually around cats, whether it's a pet store or outside or something like that. And you like to do it slowly but surely over multiple sessions. And then you'll slowly get to the point where your mind is comfortable with this. I had to do the same thing with my son. When we were living in the USA, my son was 2 years old. We came here when he was 2.5. One day we were walking down the street. I was holding his hand. We were just in the neighborhood walking, and there was this little puppy. He was about 9 months old. It was a German Shepherd. It was a pretty big dog, and he saw this little kid coming, and he lurched forward and kind of jumped on my son, and my son so I picked him up and I held him, and then we walked past the dog. It was no big deal, because I know the dog was just trying to play, trying to lick him and all this kind of stuff. But then when we came to Thailand, he was probably about 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old. I noticed that he was afraid of dogs, and he didn't even know why. I was watching him when he was around dogs, and he just didn't want to be around dogs. He was very scared of them. And I asked him if he remembered what happened in the USA, and he said no. And I explained to him what happened, and that his mind was clinging to this experience, and he had this experience, and now his mind needed to let this go, and he needed to come around dogs and slowly get comfortable. So, he would start where they were on the ground, and he would be way far away from them, and he would kind of like touch them near their tail. He wouldn't go near their face and stuff like that. And slowly but surely, he got more and more comfortable over multiple times with animals. And now he's not afraid of dogs any longer. But this is what you're going to need to do, is slowly but surely. Because sometimes we don't even realize the incident that actually occurred that caused this clinging in the mind. Like, my son was 2 years old. Sometimes it can be in our childhood that we see a spider, and maybe mom screams or dad screams about the spider. And now as a 2-year-old child, our mind has been imprinted or conditioned to think that spiders are bad. And whenever I see a spider, I'm supposed to be scared. And now your mind is conforming to what other people are doing around you. And now you need to be able to let that go and see that cats are not fearful. There's no reason why you need to be afraid of a cat. And now you just do that over multiple times, expose your mind to it, and you replace any kind of memories of anything harmful that has happened around cats. You replace it with these new experiences, and now your mind can let that go. You can associate positive experiences with cats.
Hi. So I'm a Canadian, right? Donald Trump has talked about taking over our country and wrecking our economy and so on. I'm over here. I'm feeling a certain amount of anxiety about that. It's hard for me to kind of enjoy being here because there's a part of me that thinks I've got to get back home. If I don't get back home, something terrible is going to happen, and we're going to be cut off here, and I'll never be able to go back home again. Or something will happen to my house. Somehow the property will be destroyed, or all our wealth will be destroyed, and so on. So the question really is how to deal. I mean, a lot of that is irrational, but how do I kind of deal with that kind of anxiety?
Yeah, so that there's nothing about going home that's going to stop any of that occurring. If it was going to occur, more likely than not, it's not going to occur. But if it did, there's nothing you could do to stop it. But what you would like to do is, did I teach you guys? I don't think I taught it in this class. Let me teach you guys. Maybe I did. Did I teach you guys about reflection on death or contemplation of death? I didn't do that in this class. Okay. So one of the things that people sometimes bring up in this particular talk is they explain how they're afraid of death, and they're fearful of death, and they're wondering how they can eliminate that fear. And what I teach them is something called reflection on death or contemplation of death. This is something that the Buddha taught, and it relates to what you're teaching or what you're asking too, is that what you do is you sit quietly and you close your eyes, and over a 10 or 15 minute period, 20-minute period, you convince yourself that you've died. And you basically live that out like a fly on the wall, and you walk through all the scenario. You're not aspiring to die. You're not wanting to die, but you just kind of live your life, or you live through your mind's eye that this has actually occurred. Like maybe the police or the doctors have called up your parents or your siblings, your next of kin, your life partner. Maybe they arrange a funeral. Maybe they're crying and grieving, perhaps. You just play it out in your mind all the way through to after the burial or the cremation or whatever it is. And you get comfortable with this death, because death is going to come visit every single one of us. And it's either going to sneak up on us and catch us by surprise, and it's like pulling the carpet out from under our feet or chopping us off at the knees, or we can go visit death. That's what contemplation of death is. That's what reflection of death is. It's like, hey, death, I see you over there in the corner, and I know you're going to come visit me, but you know what? I'm going to come visit you. And now you go visit death, and you get comfortable with the whole notion that yes, this body is going to die at some point, and now you can just be very comfortable with that. So you can do that for yourself, and you can do that multiple times, and you might actually grieve when this is occurring. You might be sorrowful when this is occurring. That's why you'd like to have breathing mindfulness meditation on board, so you can regain your composure. You can also do this for other beings too. Like if you're attached to your wife or your children or your siblings, you can do this within their mind as a separate session. You would like to do it within your mind multiple times to be able to train your mind to let go of them. And then you're not aspiring for them to die, but you're training your mind to get to the point where you're comfortable with this that it's going to occur. Either you're going to die or they're going to die first. So when you learn how to do this, you can also do it in these situations, in situations that your mind doesn't want to confront and it doesn't want to experience. And there's no way for you to induce that, and you're not interested in inducing that anyway, but you can live it out within your own mind. Is you can close your eyes and pretend like this is the case, like a wrecking ball shows up, a bulldozer shows up to your house, it's going to destroy your house and erect a monument to Donald Trump or something like this, right? And you're like, no, not my land, right? So you can play this out within your own mind over a 5, 10, 20-minute period and just get comfortable with like, okay, this has occurred. And now your mind has to let go of this house, because that's what your craving is you're holding on to your material possessions, and you would like to get to the point where you're not doing that. So you can do those kinds of things, but also because it's holding on to wealth, if you're not already, I suggest that you practice generosity, where you're giving and sharing with other people. And it doesn't have to be enormous amounts. It can be, whatever amount you're comfortable with, but frequently, day by day, that you're sharing with other people and letting go. You're not going to deplete your wealth. That's not what you're interested in, but you're just looking to kind of share a little bit of it here and there and be willing to live open-handedly. And this is going to help you feel more comfortable with this kind of situation. So these two things together is what will help you.
That's really helpful. One last thing about that. So you're talking about the identification with material possessions. What about the idea of home? Because I find that comes up with this as well. Like the sense, like, what if I'm homeless? What if I don't have roots anywhere and I kind of blow around from place to place?
Yeah, this is the same thing. The mind's craving to see a particular place as home, and this is mine. It's kind of like when we were animals, we had a nest if we were a bird, right? Or if we were a lion, we had a certain territory, and this was ours, right? And even though we're human beings, the unenlightened mind functions very much like an animal. So your mind's trying to kind of have that domain, that this is my domain. And you need to be able to shed that away, where more and more you feel comfortable no matter where you're at. Like feel home here, you feel home there, wherever you are, that is home. And that just comes with gradually wearing away this idea that there's only one place that you can feel comfortable. And when you're not there, you feel uncomfortable. And somehow you have to protect this place, right? Because look at what we do in a domestic environment. We have a home, we put a fence around it, we put security systems, like this is mine. It's just like an animal going around and marking its territory with its urine and its scent. It's the same exact thing, but we're doing it with physical structures, right? So you need to be able to just see that as an animalistic instinct and realize that you can shed that through the gradual training of the mind with breathing mindfulness meditation, with generosity, and just start getting more and more comfortable no matter where you are in the world.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay. So I can yesterday about my anger. So I noticed I'm get very extremely anger towards injustice and unfair, and also the cruelty to human and animals. Mm-hmm. So today we learn how to analyze what caused it and what's the plan. So I'm kind of confused what caused my anger towards. So sometimes I justify my anger because.
Yeah.
So Nothing wrong with me being anger.
So what this is the mind craving for the world to be a certain way. The Buddha calls it craving and worry for the world. That the mind, in your mind, the world should function a certain way. And when you see something happening, you don't like that it's happening that way. This is craving and worry for the world, wanting the world to be a certain way. And you need to be able to understand that the world is actually functioning through these natural laws, and it's functioning exactly the way that this cause and effect in this natural law of karma is happening. That oftentimes we have a certain image in our mind of how we want the world to function. And when it's not functioning that way, that's where we get worried or frustrated or agitated. But the more you understand how the world is functioning through this natural law of karma, then you'll realize that the world is functioning exactly the way that this natural law of karma describes, through this cause and effect or action and result. So you're going to need to get to the point where you're no longer craving for the world to be a certain way. And this is going to, by the way, when you're having this experience, is it like when you're watching the news or something like this? Yeah. Okay. So what you're going to need to do in this situation is you're going to need to distance yourself from the news for a period of time. I did this for a whole year. Where I stopped watching the news. It was one of the most peaceful years ever when you step away from the news, but you're going to need to step away from the news. Don't worry, you're still going to know what's going on in the world because people are going to tell you. People are going to have conversation with you and let you know. But ultimately, you would like to distance yourself from it for a good 6 months to a year. Then you would like to slowly start bringing it back into your life, but being attentive to your mind so that now when you watch it for like 5 minutes. And if you notice any frustration coming up in the mind, you turn off the news and you go away from it for 2 or 3 weeks. And now you bring it back in your mind. You start interacting with it again, and you kind of observe the mind. And if you're noticing that you're able to watch it without being frustrated or agitated, then you can kind of elongate it slowly but surely. But you're not interested in just jumping back into the deep end. You would like to watch it maybe like for 5 minutes and then go like a week or so without watching it, and then watch it for maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes and then go like a week or so without watching it, so that you kind of slowly reintegrate it back into your life. Because there's no harm in watching the news, but you just need to be able to do it without craving, desire, attachment. So if you distance yourself from it for a good 6 months to a year, you'll be able to eliminate your craving for the world to be a certain way, and then you can slowly reintegrate it back into your life, because it's kind of nice to know what's going on in the world, but you'd like to be able to do it without that anger, and this is the way to do it. Mm-hmm.
So the problem would be like being on time is something that is very important to me, and my expectation is that if I'm on time, you should be on time. And I've also, through this craving, have impressed this upon my children. So now they are not on time. They are also they feel anxious, they feel upset. So I want to move us away from having these feelings, but also holding on to it that it would be wise to be on time.
Sure. Okay. So there's getting rid of the craving. So that's what I'm going to teach you. But then there's, after you do that, then of course it's kind of wise to try to be on time, but now you can do it without any kind of craving, desire, attachment. So what you would like to do at this point is you would like to intentionally be late for things. And I noticed that I think you were late this morning, right, to come here? Perfect, right? You would like to do that from time to time. Come to things late, particularly in situations where you know that the other person doesn't have a craving for you to be there on time, so you're perfectly comfortable to come here late, because I'm not going to get angry, I'm not going to get agitated, and even if I did, you'd be studying with the wrong person, right? You wouldn't be interested in studying with a teacher who would be like that. Like, how could I help you get rid of anger if I was getting angry myself? So you would like to intentionally show up late to things, not every single time, but sporadically, and get the mind comfortable with being late to to these particular situations. And when you notice that you can show up late 3, 4, 5, 6 different times at different events, and there's no guilt, there's no shame, there's no stress, there's no anxiety, then that's where you're like, okay, well, now I'm just going to make an attempt to go to things on time, because it's wise to show up to things on time, but fully knowing that because of impermanence, there's going to be some situations where you are going to be late. So you're going to need to expose the mind to that thing that it doesn't want, which is it doesn't want to be late. So you're going to need to be late on multiple occasions to be able to train your mind that now when that anxiety is coming up, when the fear is coming up, or the guilt or the shame or whatever it is, you're going to have to cut it off and cut it off and cut it off. So you will do this sporadically until you get to the point where there's been a long track record of no discontent feelings by showing up late. Then you know, like, aha, I know that I've eliminated this craving. So now you just make the wise choice to show up on time. But even with that, you're still going to be late occasionally because of impermanence. And that's where you can monitor the mind. That's like the same thing like my phone. Like I did those 3 sessions where I didn't go outside with the phone, and I was pretty convinced that I'd eliminated the craving. But then 2 months later, when I accidentally left the phone at home, I could see like, the mind is still peaceful. The mind is still joyful. And then when the phone broke, I was like, look, it's still peaceful. It's still joyful. So those are those confirmations for you that you've done the work that you need to do. So this is how you would do it.
And how would I help my children who they didn't have craving, but now they do?
Yeah, they've adopted it.
They've adopted it from
they've taken it on. So what you do is you do this for yourself first, so that you can get to the point where you're liberated from this craving without the family necessarily knowing what you're doing. When you go out on your own to different things, you work on your own craving. And now when you've eliminated your craving and you see that what you did worked and you have confidence in this approach that I'm teaching you, now you go to your family, you're like, hey guys, we're going to go over here. But guess what? We're going to play a little game today, because I know your ages of your kids, you're like 3, 4, I think, and 4, 6, and 10, right? Yeah. So, hey guys, we're going to play a little bit of a game today. Now, I know that we usually work really hard to go places on time, but today we're going to intentionally be late. And your kids are like, no, Dad, no, we can't be late. Yes, we can, because being late means that there's just impermanence. We can't always be on time. And if we crave to be on time all the time, then you're going to be stressed and you're going to have anxiety. And we're going to do something that's going to eliminate this. And they're looking at each other like, I'm giving you guys permission to be late. We're going to be late today. And wherever you're going, right? And now that it's fun for them. So now they're unconditioning their mind that it's no longer craving to be on time, but you're going to need to do this a few times before their mind fully lets it go. And now, okay, now they're used to getting late. They're being late. They're not stressed. They're not having anxiety. Then you follow up with them and you say, okay, guys, now that we've done that over the last month, we've been late a bunch of times. I can see you guys are completely peaceful with being late. Now let's talk about what's wise. And now, is it wise to be late, or should we attempt to go places on time? And they're like, yeah, of course, Dad, we should go places on time. Okay, so we're going to make our best effort to go places on time, but fully realizing because of impermanence that sometimes we're going to be late, and that's okay. So we're not going to rush, and we're not going to hurry, and we're not going to bolt out the door and make a bunch of quick decisions, but we're going to take our time, and we're going to gradually work towards being on time, fully realizing that sometimes we'll be late. So you're helping them to cultivate wisdom here about the universal truth of impermanence and discontentedness and cutting things off and what's wise and unwise. And it's going to take more than one conversation. And you do this with each individual situation, and you'll see that things just get better and better. You're going to need to do a lot of talking and educating and guidance to help them. Mm-hmm. You have a question? Yep. Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me? Oh, yeah. Right. So the thing that's slightly confusing for me is the pleasant feelings. So obviously we all want to have pleasant feelings or be happy. So for example, I'm thinking of moving to Thailand, which makes me feel happy. So are you saying that I shouldn't move to Thailand because it would make me happy?
No,
Like,
I'm not saying that. No, what I'm saying is eliminate the craving, desire, attachment to live in Thailand, because living in Thailand is not permanent. Because eliminating a craving, desire, attachment doesn't necessarily mean you don't do this thing. It just means that you need to learn how to do it without a craving, desire, attachment. That moving here isn't going to solve all your problems, right? Because the problem is inside your own mind, and your mind's going to follow you here. So whatever is going on in any other place that you're at, in any other situations that you're in, just moving here isn't going to solve that. So what the mind does is it gets excited because it thinks like, Thailand's going to be so much better. It's going to make my life so much better. And maybe there are going to be things here that you're going to appreciate that are improved from where you're living now. But you're going to meet with challenges here too. There's going to be other things that maybe you don't have issues with in your current living location, that here is going to be different. And now you're going to need to overcome those things. So moving to Thailand isn't going to solve, all your problems, because the problems are within one's own mind. So where you see your mind getting excited about Thailand, you need to cut that off and let it go, and cut it off and let it go. And then you can make wise decisions towards moving to Thailand, but just understand that it's not going to solve your problems, because you're still going to have cravings, desires, attachments when you come here to Thailand, and you need to train your mind to eliminate those. So eliminating a craving, desire, attachment doesn't mean that you don't do something. It just means that you need to train your mind to do it without that craving. So I'll give you another example. Let's say I go to a restaurant and I have this piece of chocolate cake, and it's the most amazing piece of chocolate cake ever. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is the best chocolate cake ever, right? And now I'm thinking, I can't wait to come back here again and get this chocolate cake. Man, it's going to be so good, because now I'm craving it, right? So now when I come back next week and they have my chocolate cake, I'm so excited. I'm so happy. They have my chocolate cake and I eat that chocolate cake again. Well, now I come back the next week and they don't have my chocolate cake. And now I'm frustrated, I'm agitated, and I'm annoyed. Okay, so we can see that the mind is attached here. But that doesn't mean I don't ever eat chocolate cake. What it means is when I come back the next time to the restaurant, I don't order the chocolate cake. Maybe I get fruit, or maybe I don't get any dessert at all, right? And now I do that for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times where I don't get the chocolate cake. But then when I realize I'm just as peaceful, just as content, just as joyful without the chocolate cake, now I might choose to start eating the chocolate cake occasionally when I come to this restaurant. So it doesn't mean that you need to eliminate the idea of moving to Thailand. It just means that you need to learn how to do it, realizing that Thailand's not going to solve everything for you, and realize like, okay, this is a wise decision perhaps, and you've got certain rationale of why you're choosing to move to Thailand. And that's what's going to help you to have a really good experience here, because if you move with craving, that means you'll get so excited of being here, but then after 6 months or a year, that's going to wear off. And then you're not going to enjoy being here anymore. And now the mind's going to look for, where's the next place that I need to move to in order to get that happiness again, right? So you would like to be able to make wise decisions, and that's what's going to lead to your peace and your joy, where you can just always be happy. Mm-hmm. All right. You have a question? Yep.
David, thank you. So I'm a theater teacher, and I am I've been on sabbatical, and I have taken another job as a teacher, but I have been feeling for many years that what I'd like to do is to be in more of a student position, and rather than a teaching position. The difficulty, of course, is monetary. And I've let go of what other people think about that decision. That's no longer important to me. But what I sometimes worry about is this a regression to an emotionally safe space? Or is it really stemming from a desire to be a student and recognize that I want to be in a learning position, not in a leading position? So I wonder about that. And does that make sense?
Yeah, I would need to ask you a bunch of questions to be able to uncover more of what's going on there. Probably not something I can do here, but maybe we can talk privately and I can help you by asking you a bunch of questions. Adrian.
Yeah, I find that sometimes when I want to ask questions in class, there's this part of me that's like, I want to be seen and perceived within myself and within the community as someone who's progressing and like implementing what I need to do to like grow within these teachings, right? It feels like there's some sort of personal existence view and conceit in there, but it also feels like it's driving me to want to learn. So I wonder how you would approach like kind of cutting off what is there that I'm noticing that might be kind of like egoically based, and then leaving the rest to like help me kind of progress here.
Yeah, this is what we're used to when our mind is untrained, is being motivated by those kinds of things. But it is going to produce unwholesome results for us, because then you've got that churning in your mind, constantly second guessing yourself, being hesitant to ask questions or wanting to ask questions and being perceived a certain way and having difficulties because of it. So this is personal existence view in conceit. It's what we refer to as the ego. The word ego didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha. So he describes it as personal existence view in conceit, which is actually really helpful because there's different symptoms with these two fetters. And the way that you eliminate them is unique to each one of them. And if you look at volume 1, chapter 16, that's where it's going to teach you how to eliminate personal existence view in conceit, because there's certain proactive things that you're going to need to be doing on a consistent long-term basis in order to eliminate personal existence view in conceit. Because when you get rid of that, you can still have the motivation to progress in these teachings, but you're not doing it based in personal existence view and conceit. You're doing it because it's a wise decision. So you might have those things in there that are motivating some of your decisions now, but you can get rid of them through proactively training your mind. It all comes down to having the Eightfold Path as a foundation, but then there's additional things that you can be doing. So that's why it's better for you to look there, because it's a pretty detailed teaching. In another 3 weeks, I'm going to be teaching it as part of the group learning program. So if you're attending the group learning program, you'll learn it there, but you're welcome to look at that ahead of time as well, because it's pretty extensive and it's going to take many years for you to eliminate both of these. It's not a very quick fix. These things like, eliminating a fear of a spider or cats or things like this, those you can eliminate pretty readily within a few weeks, even sometimes a few days. But something like this, which every unenlightened mind has to a certain degree, it's going to take multiple years to wear that away. So it's best for you to look at that content in volume 1, chapter 16. Yep. Okay, let me see if we have anything online here. All right, I'm not seeing any questions online anywhere. Okay, so this next topic that I have to talk about, it was planned to come back from lunch and do a meditation together and then teach you this topic. But this topic literally takes about maybe 15, 20 minutes to teach it to you. So if you guys would like, I can actually teach it to you now, because we've got basically 40 minutes until 12. I could teach it to you now, and then we could actually be done for the day. You guys good with that? You still would probably like to meditate this afternoon on your own, but at least we'll have this topic covered, because we don't need to necessarily go to lunch and come back and do all these things. I can just teach you this topic now. You guys all good with that? Yeah, and then you'll have the rest of the day for yourself. Okay, so this next topic is called Cultivating Healthy Mental States, Loving Kindness, Compassion, Sympathetic Joy, and Equanimity. These are 4 healthy mental states that you're going to need to cultivate, because they antidote and remedy certain symptoms that are in your mind. This is where the Buddha gets the reputation for being like a doctor, because there's certain symptoms that he sees, and then he gives you the antidote or the prescription. But you are your own best doctor. right? You don't need somebody else to be a doctor for you. Of course, when we have a medical issue, we go see a doctor, but we're just listening to their advice. And ultimately, we're making a decision for ourselves of whether to take that medicine or not, right? That doctor can't be effective if we don't make the decision to actually take the medicine. So we are our own best doctor because we're attending to this body ourselves. We know this body better than anybody in the world, right? Because the same thing is true about your mind, that you're going to know your mind better than anyone in the world because you're living with this mind and you'll have full insight into it based on your mindfulness. So I'm going to teach you what these 4 healthy mental states are. I'm going to teach you what they are. I'm going to teach you what they antidote so that way, when you see these symptoms in your mind, you'll know what to bring into the mind in order to antidote it. So, for example, here, the first one is loving kindness. What loving kindness is, by the way, there's a microphone on somewhere. If you guys could check your mics, there's a little bit of feedback somewhere. The loving kindness is active goodwill towards all beings without judgment. This is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. This is what loving kindness is, where you're not judging other beings to determine if they deserve your loving kindness. You are just being loving and kind, having a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. What this remedies is the unwholesome quality of anger, hatred, ill will, and all those lesser versions, even annoyance and dislike. So we've talked about this related to the meditation that I taught you guys this morning. So the way that you cultivate this in the mind is through loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness in daily life. And then anytime you see with your mindfulness that any of these unwholesome qualities are coming up, you apply right effort to cut off and let go of those unwholesome qualities. And then you apply right effort to bring in the wholesome quality. So if you have this tool belt and you know that anger, hatred, ill will, the frustration, agitation, annoyance, the dislike, that if you know the opposite is loving kindness, when you come to an environment where there's somebody and you start noticing this dislike towards them and you're kind of irritated and frustrated, understand that that's your own mind, and now cut that off. Apply right effort to cut that off, and now arise some loving kindness where you have a genuine interest in seeing this being be well. This is going to rewire your mind. Right? So if you do this in each individual situation where you're noticing this more and more, you'll just have loving kindness for everybody around you whenever you're in these situations. So you're going to need to use your mindfulness to be aware of any of these unwholesome qualities arising, cut that off and let it go, and then bring in the wholesome quality of loving kindness. All the while, be practicing loving kindness meditation each day in order to bring this loving kindness up in your mind. So if you're doing loving kindness meditation, remember, meditation is 2 or 3 times a day for 30 minutes or more. You would like to be at least one of those, be loving kindness meditation. And I'm suggesting to you to do that in the morning so that you can go out into your day being loving and kind. But that doesn't mean you can't do loving kindness at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, because you can, right? Maybe you get a phone call and you notice all this anger coming up in your mind. Well, if you know the antidote is loving kindness, do some loving kindness meditation. Bring in some loving kindness in the mind. Don't allow the mind to dwell in that anger. If you allow your mind to dwell in that anger, it's staying wired that way. The sooner you cut that off and let that go, the more you can transform the mind. If you allow that mind to stay wired with the anger, it's just going to keep firing that way. So you would like to bring in this loving kindness as soon as possible to knock this down so that you don't keep your mind wired with that anger. Okay, so this is loving kindness. Then there's compassion. Compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others. These are mental qualities. This doesn't mean that you're going to act upon it, right? But what the compassion is that your mental state is that you have concern for the misfortune of others, and you would like to cultivate that mental state. Whether you take action on it or not, that's a different question. But here, this is just the cultivation of the concern for the misfortune of others. What this is antidoting is the unwholesome quality of indifference, where you could care less about what happens to other people. But also on the other side of that is the worry and the anxiety. That's what you were talking about a little bit, right? Where the mind has this worry and anxiety about the world. These are two opposite sides, right? The mind sees all the problems in the world, and now it has worry and anxiety about the world. That's because the mind doesn't have the compassion in the middle way, right? Where indifference is just not caring at all. So if you have this craving, desire, attachment for the world to be a certain way, the mind is holding on and wanting the world to be a certain way, you can't be peaceful and joyful there. But if you're all the way on the other side, where you are indifferent and you could care less what's happening to other people, you're not going to be peaceful and joyful there either. So the middle way is the compassion, where you have concern for the misfortune of others. And this is where you can be in the middle, because when you have concern, it just means you're concerned. It doesn't mean you're worried. It doesn't mean that you're having anxiety. It's just that you have concern. You see somebody on the street that doesn't have food, I'm concerned about that. Whether you choose to take action about it is a whole different topic, right? But that's up to you to decide. Maybe in some situations you do take action. Maybe in other situations you're not able to. It's not about every single time you see somebody in need, you need to do something about it, because you can't always do something about it, right? There were times where I was on my way home with a pizza for my son, and he had been at home all day long without food, and there's a motorbike accident right in front of me. And typically I would stop and help that person. But when I looked, there was other people helping them. And for me, I needed to help this person at home, and I had this pizza that I needed to give them. So in that situation, I was going to take this pizza home to help my son be able to eat. And I knew that this person was taken care of because there was 2 or 3 or 4 people over there taking care of them. So in that situation, I had concern for the person, but I didn't act upon it because my compassion was going to be acted upon through giving this pizza to my son. But in another situation, maybe I'm driving down the road and there's a motorbike accident, and now I might stop and actually help that person, right? So your action is separate from what we're talking about here. This is the mental state of having this concern for the misfortune of others. And on one side is the indifference, where you could care less. On the other side is the worry and anxiety, and you're looking to come to the middle, where you can just have concern for the misfortune of others. And the way that you cultivate this is through your right mindfulness and your right effort. That wherever you see these unwholesome qualities of indifference or worry or anxiety, when you see that with your mindfulness, you apply right effort and cut that off and let it go. And you bring the mind to the middle where there's concern. In concern, you can maintain your contentedness. If you're worried, that's discontentedness, right? Someone who sees all the problems in the world, they're going to be very worried, right? But if someone understands the solutions to all these problems, then they can understand they can be concerned, right? I'm concerned about the world, but I'm not worried about it, because I understand that in order for the world to get better, each individual person has to decide for themselves to make different decisions, because what they're experiencing is a result of their decisions. Each individual person is going to need to cultivate wisdom and make different decisions. And I can't do that for them. I can just make it available for other people. So I'm concerned about the world, but I'm not worried about it, and I don't have anxiety. And I'm also not indifferent about the world. Like I could care less. Right? I'm helping people to be able to learn how to be concerned, to have this compassion. This is what you would like to be able to do. And you accomplish that through whenever you see these unwholesome qualities arising, you cut that off with your right effort, and you bring in the wholesome quality of compassion. So you guys have any questions on these two? No questions? Okay, so now the next two. Sympathetic joy. This is joy for other success, even if you didn't contribute to it. This is like, you got a new house. Congratulations. Wow, I know you've been working on that for a while. Wow, congratulations. Even though I live in a wooden shack in the woods, I'm pleased for their success, right? I'm not jealous. I'm not envious, because that's the unwholesome qualities, right? The envy, the jealousy, and on the other side of that is the pride too, where the mind's so prideful of what I've got. You can't have something good. I can't be happy for you because I want to be prideful for what I've got, right? So this is where you would like to bring in is this sympathetic joy, where we have joy for others' success. Someone applies for a job at work. They wanted a promotion. You were interested in a promotion too. They get the job instead of you. Be joyful for their success. No need to be jealous and envious, right? Because that's just going to come through in your intentions, your speech, and your actions. And now you're going to damage the relationship. So you would like to be joyful for others' success. And you might not feel it when you're first starting to do this, because what you need to do is you need to apply right mindfulness to see the jealousy and envy come up. And you're going to need to apply the right effort to cut it off and let it go. So Barbara comes by your desk. Hey, by the way, I got that promotion. And inside, you might feel the jealousy and the envy. And all you can do is smile and say, congratulations, Barbara. I'm pleased for you. But inside, you're jealous, you're envious. But you don't need to let that come out through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. So when you're trying to bring these qualities, all four of these, when you're trying to bring these up in the mind, it's almost like a fight. It's almost like a struggle with inside your own mind, because you're trying to wire your mind to do this. So just know that that's normal. And when you push through that struggle more and more, it won't be a struggle anymore. The Buddha teaches that don't shrink back from the struggle, because he knows getting to enlightenment, there's a certain amount of struggle, and you're going to experience that internal struggle sometimes. And when your mind feels that struggle, what the mind typically wants to do is run away from it, because it feels uncomfortable with the struggle. It wants everything to be comfortable. It's craving that permanent comfort. So when it feels the struggle, it wants to run away from it. And if you do that, you're never going to make progress, because every time you feel that struggle, you run away from it, right? You would like to turn around and walk towards it. So where you feel your mind struggling with jealousy and envy, or indifference, or worry, or anger, or all these other things, what you would like to do is arise these wholesome qualities in the mind and push through whatever that unwholesome quality is that you're trying to get rid of in your mind by bringing in the wholesome quality. And in this case, sympathetic joy. So when you're noticing with your mindfulness, the envy, the jealousy, the pride coming up, cut that off and let it go with your right effort and bring in the sympathetic joy. Even if it feels painful to tell Barbara congratulations on that new job because you wanted it so bad, just congratulate her, right? Or just smile and say, congratulations, or whatever it is that you need to say. But there's no sense of allowing the jealousy or envy to come out. Then there's something called equanimity. There's two sides to this. There's the calmness, the composure, the evenness of temper, especially in a difficult situation. And then there's treating everybody fairly. So I'm going to talk about these two things separately. The calmness and composure, the evenness of temper, especially in a difficult situation, this is so important, because when your mind is calm, you'll have mindfulness or awareness of mind. When you have awareness of mind, you'll have concentration. And when you have concentration, you'll be able to access your wisdom, make wise decisions, and experience wholesome results. But if your mind is shaken up, if it's uncalm, you're not going to have mindfulness, you're not going to have concentration, and you're not going to be able to access your wisdom, and you're going to make unwise decisions, and you're going to experience unwholesome results. So if you got a phone call that your mom's been in a terrible car accident and she's being rushed to the hospital, she's in the back of an ambulance, if you got all shaken up and you grabbed your car keys and you jumped in your car and you're bolting across town to get to the hospital, you're most likely going to get in a car accident yourself. And at the very least, when you show up to the hospital, if you show up to the hospital, you're not going to be able to pay attention to the doctors and the nurses who are trying to tell you what's going on with your mom so that you can make wise decisions. Your mind's going to be all shaken up. So if you're practicing equanimity and you understand the importance of keeping your mind calm so you can make wise decisions, then you know the very last thing you're interested in doing is allowing your mind to be shaken up. Instead, you get that phone call and you think, thank goodness. Mom's in the back of an ambulance. She's with the people that can help her. She's with emergency medical technicians being rushed to the hospital. Perfect. That's exactly where she needs to be. She's about to arrive to a trauma center with doctors and nurses and equipment. Excellent. Those people will be able to take care of her. Let me calmly make my way to the hospital so that when I show up, I can find out what's going on, and now I can make some wise decisions to help her. And now you take your time and you wisely make your way to the hospital, right? And now you show up and you're able to be calm, have your mindfulness, have your concentration, access your wisdom. If you understand that your goal is to make 100% decisions that are wise, anytime you make unwise decisions, it's going to produce unwholesome results. So if you're looking to get to harmonious relationships, you're going to need to know this natural law of karma more and more and make wiser and wiser and wiser decisions. And you can't make wise decisions when your mind's shaken up. So the Buddha is teaching you to have equanimity, calmness, composure, evenness of temper, especially in a difficult situation, so that now you can make wise decisions that produces wholesome results. The second part of this is treating everyone fairly, because the root word here is equal, and you would like to treat everybody impartially, treat everybody the same, right? I learned this very early in life. I had a second grade teacher that if I was chewing gum in the classroom, she would ask me, "Do you have a piece of gum for everybody?" And I would say, "No, I don't have a piece of gum for everybody." "Okay, you've got to spit out your gum. But if you have a piece of gum for everybody, you can chew your gum," right? So I took her up on that offer. One day I went out and I bought gum for everybody, and I brought it in and I said, "Teacher, I've got gum for everybody." "Okay, hand it out. You guys can all eat gum. You can all chew gum." Right? So you would like to treat everyone fairly. So that's the way this teacher was functioning, right? That it couldn't be just David chewing gum. Everybody had to be chewing gum. So it's the same kind of thing. If you're taking donuts or bagels into the office, you're not interested in just getting a couple just for your friends, because now the other people, they don't understand that their jealousy is because of their craving, their desire, their attachment. They're wanting those donuts or that bagel, and now you didn't bring it for them. They're getting angry. They're associating their anger to you. They think you're the one who's causing them to be angry, and they're going to push you aside. You're going to lose relationships if you don't treat people fairly. So if you're a boss or you're an employee, you're coming to a professional environment and you're sharing something like that, you're practicing some generosity, you would like to treat everybody fairly. And let's just say you work in a big company with hundreds of employees, right? You probably can get donuts and bagels for everybody. So what you do is maybe you have 3 dozen donuts or 2 dozen donuts. You put them in a conference room and you send out an email to everybody where you've invited everybody. You say, "Hey, I've put a couple of dozen of donuts in the conference room. If anybody would like one, they're in there." So that then the first few people that come and get donuts, they get donuts. And then when the 100th person comes and there's no donuts, they understand it's because of their choice. They didn't act upon it right away when they saw the email, right? So now it's their choice that led to them not getting a donut, not yours. You actually shared it with everybody. You were impartial. So in all situations, you would like to treat everybody equally and everybody fairly. What this is remedying is the restlessness, the worry, the anxiety, and the overactive mind. That's what the mental calmness and composure is working to eliminate. The restlessness, the worry, the anxiety, and overactive mind. Treating everyone impartially is helping you eliminate any kind of arrogance and ego, because when you are having arrogance and ego, there's other things that you need to do in that chapter 16. But equanimity, when you're treating everyone fairly, you're looking at everyone as being equal, because what the ego is going to want to do is put yourself above people or put yourself below people. And you would like to be able to see everyone as equal. So when you're practicing this aspect of equanimity, where you're treating everyone equal, this is going to help you to eliminate some arrogance and some ego, some of that from your mind. So just like the others, you're using mindfulness, that wherever you see restlessness, worry, anxiety, and overactive mind starting to come up, you cut that off and let it go. So you get that phone call and you see that your mind is about to get anxiety because mom's in the ambulance. You notice that and you cut it off and let it go. And now you bring in the equanimity with your right effort. Okay, so this is sympathetic joy and equanimity. Any questions on these two?
So I'm been trying to work with my kids on sympathetic joy, and I'm wondering if this is a good method. Is we tend to play like card games or board games, and obviously due to impermanence, they can't win every time, but they want to win. And so, is this maybe a good way to help them train this?
Yes, you can even make games where, like, when one of your children win, the other children, like, maybe like you guys start out with like several M&Ms, and when one of your children win, the other children give that person a M&M, right? They're giving them something to put in some generosity, where it's like they're joyful for their success, so that way they're not holding on to the candy themselves, but they're also showing joy for this person's success, that they're getting this candy because they're now willing to give it away. So they're showing their joy because this other person won.
And then my second question would be about equanimity. Is that children have a very strong, my children anyway, so a very strong sense of things need to be fair at all times, which is not possible on their ages. And so how would you approach this? Because, like my 10-year-old has more privileges than my 4-year-old, but they all want to do the same. They all want to be treated the exact same.
Can you give me an example of that?
Bedtime. 10-year-old gets to stay up a little bit later. The other ones have to go to bed a little bit earlier.
Okay. So this is where you need to be able to talk to them and help them understand that as younger human beings, they need more sleep. And this is just a biological thing that is according to their body, that they're going to need more sleep, because what they're lacking is they're lacking wisdom. Whenever someone's struggling with anything, it's always a lack of wisdom. So you just need to sit down and help them. And you're probably going to need to teach it to them more than once, because they're not going to just get it right away. Is teach them about the biology of the body and how when you're younger, you need more sleep. And as you age, you won't need as much sleep. And when they get older, they're also going to be able to do that exact same thing like your 10-year-old. Okay, so now this is what's considered the Brahma Viharas, these 4 things: loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. The word Brahma Vihara, where this comes from, is during the lifetime of the Buddha, they refer to God as Brahma. That's what that means. The word Vihara means abode or dwelling. So there were people that were teaching, besides the Buddha, there were people called Brahmin, who were like Hindu priests, and they were teaching rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, prayer, these kinds of things. The Buddha wasn't teaching those kinds of things, but these Brahmin, they were teaching these 4 Brahmin Viharas. They were saying that, hey, if you would like to dwell with God, that you would need to practice these 4 things. So that's where this word Brahma Vihara comes from. The Buddha never taught it that way. He taught it as 4 healthy mental states, essentially. But you'll hear some people refer to them as the Brahma Viharas. And I'm just giving you guys the background of why that is, because these are teachings that were being taught by these Hindu priests. And the Buddha knew that there were 4 healthy mental states that you needed to cultivate in order to get to enlightenment. So that's why they're part of his teachings as well. But they're oftentimes referred to as Brahma Viharas. So I refer to them as the 4 healthy mental states. There's something else that I teach in this particular chapter. This is chapter 14 of volume 1. I teach about generosity in this chapter. It's not one of the Brahma Viharas. It's not considered to be one of these 4 healthy mental states, but it is a healthy mental state. You're going to need to practice generosity in order to get to enlightenment. The Buddha practiced extensive generosity throughout his life, and previous to that too. There's talks that I give specifically about generosity because it's so important for you. You wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment without generosity. So I'm sharing this with you here in this particular talk so that you can understand that you're going to need to practice generosity. You're going to need to share your time, your effort, your energy, your resources with people more than is strictly required in any given situation, without any expectation of anything in return. And you might find this to be difficult now. But an enlightened being isn't selfish. They're not going to hold on to things and cling to things. They're going to be willing to share. But when you're practicing generosity, you need to do that from the middle way too. Because if you are sharing excessively your time, effort, energy, or resources, you wouldn't have what you need in order to sustain your life. But if you were never sharing, your mind's going to be quite selfish. So you're going to need to bring this to the middle where you can share with other people. And just like meditation frequency is more important than duration. So if you have a matter of one meditation for 30 minutes or two for 15, it's better to go for the 2 meditations for 15 minutes. You're going to get much more benefit out of that in your day. The same thing is true about generosity, that frequency is more important than the amount. So if you have the option of, donating 20 hours of your service to an orphanage once a year, or you did like an hour once a week, this is actually going to be more beneficial. Or if it was like a matter of, like $500 once a year to this homeless shelter, or $1 a day, you're going to get much more benefit out of the $1 a day because your mind's having to let go more frequently. And each time your mind's having to let go, it's actually much more beneficial for you. So you would like to be practicing generosity frequently. And you're going to need to find ways to incorporate this into your life where you can easily be practicing generosity. I think I gave you some examples yesterday. Like you're at the market, you're buying yourself some orange juice. It's like, there's some avocados. The wife likes avocados. Why don't I get her some avocados? It'll take me all of 30 seconds for that little transaction. I'm already here. Let me practice a little bit of generosity, bring her home some avocados, right? So you can do these kinds of things. You're walking into a store and you see someone's behind you, you're already going to hold the door for yourself. Might as well hold it for the person behind you too, with no expectation of anything in return, including a thank you. So you're going to need to practice generosity frequently throughout your day. So be sure that you think of this as a wholesome quality of mind, that this is what you're going to need to practice. And you can see this down here. This is a teaching from the Buddha where he says, monks, if beings knew, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they would not eat without having given, nor would the stain of selfishness obsess them and take root in their minds. Even if it were their last bite, their last mouthful, they would not eat without having shared it, if there were someone to share it with. But because beings do not know, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they eat without having given, and the stain of selfishness obsesses them and takes root in their minds. The results of giving and sharing that he's talking about, that he knows, that other people don't know, is enlightenment. What he's saying is if people understood how peaceful and joyful the enlightened mental state is, and that it's generosity that leads to that, they would not eat without having shared it if there was someone to share it with. But because beings do not know, as I know, the peace and joy of the enlightened mental state, they eat without having shared it. So here in Asia, they oftentimes will put the food in the middle and everybody kind of eats. Because if you live in a home of 4 or 6 or 8 people, you might not have enough money for everybody to be full at the end of the meal. But if the food goes in the middle and everybody takes 2 or 3 spoonfuls and now we all eat, over the course of that meal, we've all gotten a little bit of food. We might not end with everybody being full, but everybody's gotten a little bit of food and now we've shared. Right? So food is a big thing that we tend to hoard in the unenlightened state. Just like an animal hoards food, remember the unenlightened mind functions very much like an animal. So you might find that in some cases you kind of hoard food. Maybe in your home, the way you do it is you kind of load up your plate and then everybody goes and eats whatever they've loaded up on their plate. But if you start learning how to share your food, this is going to help promote generosity in your family and in your environment much more. So maybe you go get a bag of potato chips and you got your friends around, you pop open the bag of potato chips. Normally you might just start eating your potato chips, but hey, send it around the group. And if the bag comes back and there's only one potato chip eat your one potato chip and go get another bag, right? It wasn't that expensive. You can afford another bag of potato chips. Share your food with other people. This is really helpful for your mind to learn how to practice generosity in all these situations. And you'll see that your mind will let go of its craving, its desires, its attachments, and holding on to things. So this isn't one of the 4 healthy mental states, but you certainly should think about it as a healthy mental state of this practice of generosity. Okay, any questions on this one? Okay, so that brings us to tomorrow, because now we're not going to need to come back after class, but I do recommend that you do some meditation this afternoon and even this evening to incorporate that in to your day. Tomorrow, I'm going to start off with the loving kindness meditation in the morning, like we do each morning. We're going to start with meditation, but then I'm going to teach you what is true love. This is a big topic for you guys to understand, and it's one that's oftentimes not understood. So I'm going to teach you what is true love and how to love without attachment. Then I'm going to teach you how to practice in the world of the unknowing, how to have relationships with non-practitioners, because you're going to be around people who don't understand the Four Noble Truths, and they're making themselves angry, and they're blaming you for their anger, and you know that you're not causing them to be angry. How do you deal with these situations? So I'm going to teach you about that. Then I'm going to teach you this topic after lunch of practicing non-attachment, how to eliminate attachment to those who are closest to you, your children, your life partner, your parents, your siblings, people like this, because those are the attachments that you typically are holding on to the tightest. These are probably the relationships that are the most challenging for you. Your friends and stuff like this, you get along just fabulous. And this is why you probably think that the problem is your parents, or the problem is your children or your life partner. But actually the problem is in your own mind, your cravings, desires, attachments. So when you learn how to eliminate your attachment to these people, you'll actually have more harmonious relationships. So I'm going to do meditation with you guys after lunch tomorrow, like I typically do. And then I'm going to teach you guys how to eliminate attachment to the people who are closest to you. So that's the plan for tomorrow. Okay, so thank you guys for the discussion. Thank you for your interest to learn. And perhaps I'll see you guys tomorrow. Okay? Sawadee Kap. Sawadee Kap.